All right, so the Heat definitely have their work cut out for them in this series. And it's funny, in the beginning of the playoffs, out of all the contenders, I probably wanted the Lakers to win the most. It would have been nice to see LeBron get another ring, and after what happened with Kobe. But now that the Bucks have fallen off, the Clippers were a complete mess, and Miami has kind of risen to the top. Part of me kind of wants to see Miami win this series. I'm just gonna go ahead right now and say I'm not picking them. I got Lakers in six, but Miami is kind of just one of those teams that would reaffirm what we all kind of believe of the sport of basketball, that you just need good players and good coaching, and you don't need a team of all-stars to actually be good. It'd be very reminiscent of 2004 Pistons, 2011 Mavericks, 2014 Spurs, and how those teams, the Mavericks had a superstar in Dirk, and Spurs had Duncan, but obviously way past his prime, and Kawhi was still a baby in that series. But those teams were all just really well structured, really well coached. Everybody was a star in their role, and I think Miami reminds me a lot of those teams. Maybe you could throw in Toronto from last year too, but I mean, they had Kawhi and the Warriors got injured to shit. But anyways, so what does Miami have to do to win this series? I think it's going to be really difficult to continue to do what they did in the Eastern Conference against the Lakers. Miami isn't really a team that's set up to mismatch hunt like the Lakers are. Like, how the Lakers will just LeBron in particular would specifically find the weak link in your defense and just put him in pick and roll, put him in actions for his entire time on the floor until he plays that guy off the floor, basically. Miami isn't really a team to do that. So offensively, I think they're going to be great with a lot of off-ball movement, especially since LeBron kind of plays the free safety role on defense for LA. You can catch LeBron like slacking with backdoor cuts. And I think Jimmy is a great cutter. Iguodala is one of the best cutters we have in the game still. So I think they have guys to do that. Derrick Jones, if he gets time, you can throw him in there. Another interesting point that the Heat, probably need to attack in the Lakers defense is that they don't have a real great point guard defender. Danny Green's great, and I think he's super underrated on the defensive end. But Dragic could probably give Danny Green buckets, and I don't know who the Lakers are going to open up on Dragic with. It's either going to be Green or KCP. But I think Dragic can pick and roll those two to death, especially the Bam Dragic pick and roll. That has been deadly for the entire playoffs outside of that one Boston game where Dragic didn't play well. But the Lakers have had trouble this year. It's kind of been their kryptonite with small scoring point guards. And I know Dragic might not be like Dame Lillard. Dragic probably won't get you 60. But I think he's one of those guys that can get you 25 in 25 minutes and just hit absolutely back-breaking shots kind of all over the court. So I'm going to be looking for Dragic to really have a big series for Miami to have any chance. I don't think Jimmy is going to be the leading scorer on the Heat if the Heat are going to win. I think if Jimmy is the leading scorer, it's probably just going to be out of necessity and desperation, and I don't think that's when they play their best. And that's no disrespect to Jimmy. Jimmy's still the best player on the team. But this team is just better when all five guys are cooking, And with Bam's got a tough matchup, obviously. AD, and not just AD, they got JaVale and Dwight that are just going to be big bodies to throw at Bam. Bam's going to have to use his guard skills, for lack of a better term, when he's got the Dwight and JaVale matchup, and he's going to have to play him off the court that way. And then when AD's on him, Bam's just going to have to get physical. AD doesn't like to get physical. He doesn't like to have shoulders and elbows thrown at him. That's why the dude's been begging to play power forward his whole career, and we've all said AD would be much better as a center. So when Bam does get his opportunities to go against AD, he has to be physical. He's stronger, AD is more skilled and probably better at every other aspect of basketball, but that dude's fucking built. So recap, offensively, Dragic needs to go off, Jimmy needs to play steady and probably not disappear for like the first 3 quarters like he does sometimes. Sometimes he gets to the fourth quarter, he's got like 8 points, and then he'll score 12, 14 in the fourth and it'll be good, but I think they're going to need a little bit more than that from Jimmy. And Bam's just got to be consistent and physical. So now defensively, I think Miami is pretty well set up to defend LA. Probably better than any team that LA has played in the playoffs up to this point. Obviously, Bam is a defensive matchup nightmare for any team in the league. And he's quickly ascended to like a top 5 defender in the league. And I'm really confident in saying that. You know, AD and Giannis might be quote unquote better than him, but Bam's up there, yo. Bam can guard 2 through 5. If he has to switch on a point guard, like I wouldn't be terrified if I was a Miami fan. You know, obviously great rim protector, good on the help, just a really solid all-around defender in year 3, which is extremely impressive. So obviously Bam's gonna be the matchup nightmare, but then with LeBron, I know I might sound like a fool saying that somebody can slow down LeBron, because even in these series, a lot of times we look at these matchups and we're like, oh, they have like 4, 6, 8 guys that they can throw at LeBron. Like, that's probably going to be decent, and it's never decent. LeBron always gets his. But I will say, Jimmy and Iguodala have guarded LeBron a lot in the playoffs in his career, and I don't remember where I read the stat from or heard the stat, but those two have held LeBron to 42% shooting in the playoffs when they're the primary defender on him. And just my eye test alone, I know Iggy guards LeBron probably better than anybody in the league besides like prime Kawhi or some shit like that, you know? Iggy would give LeBron fits in those Golden State series. And Jimmy, it's been a while because the last time they played in the playoffs up the top of my head was 2015, I believe. Yes, it was. Because Jimmy was still with the Bulls, and that was when Derrick Rose hit that crazy game winner, and then LeBron hit that game winner the next game. Crazy series, underrated Bulls team too. But Jimmy did a good job on LeBron that series, and I know they've played before that too. The Bulls and the Heat and the Bulls and the Cavs have had some matchups. So, listen, LeBron's not going to be like bottled up, but this might not be a series or a final series where LeBron averages 35, 10, and 10, you know? This might have to be a series where AD has to pitch in at least 30 a game to win. Now, I think the weak spots on their defense is Duncan Robinson and Goran Dragic, and that's kind of why Miami goes to their zone so often, because it's easier to hide a player who can't defend in a zone, but at the same time, it's easier for a team to pick apart a zone as compared to a man, because it's all about getting that zone to collapse, kicking out, which LeBron is obviously incredible at, or cutting across the zone so you overload one side, so all of a sudden you have more offensive players on one side of the zone than there are defenders, and that's another way to get an easy shot. And we actually just saw the Lakers do this to Houston. You know, Houston's a team, just because of their size, they ran a zone for a big chunk of that playoff series, and by game 3, LA had kind of had it already figured out 100%. There was no way that, like, Houston would have had to switch up their whole defensive scheme for them to ever come back in that series. So what Miami has to do is they're probably going to have to disguise their zone, maybe even play a box and one. It's funny how the box and one has become like all of a sudden a legitimate NBA defense after Nick Nurse used it in the finals, but teams have been using it to some success, and I think this is one of those times where it's like, listen, you can hide Dragic, you can have him play like one of the wing positions on the box and one, put Iggy as the one, probably on LeBron, and then, you know, have like Bam and Derrick Jones down low and Jimmy or Tyler Hero as the other wing. I feel like that's probably going to be the best you can do in this series based on who they have on the floor, unless you just want to bench, well, not you want for the whole game, but unless like you want to run with lineups that don't have Dragic and don't have Duncan Robinson, you know, maybe even Hero too. But at that point, I think you're sacrificing way too much offense to run a lineup without any one of those guys if you're Miami. So I have faith in Spo. I think Spoelstra is a great coach. I think he's one of the 3 to 4 best coaches in the league right now. And he knows more basketball than any of us. So I think he'll probably find a way to disguise that zone and really kind of make LeBron think and work hard to figure it out. And because of that, I actually think Miami's going to go up in this series 2-1. But then I think, as these series go on, I've just seen it too much, man. I've seen teams figure out the zone. I've seen teams by like games 3, 4, 5. It just the whole series flips, and I'm thinking by after the first 3 games, Miami's gonna be up 2-1, and then the Lakers are just gonna win the next 3. I just don't think Miami is going to be able to completely morph their defense once it's figured out in the span of a game or 2. I think LeBron's too good. I don't think they're going to have the offense to really get in a shootout with LA. So yeah, I'd love to see it though. I would really, really love to see Miami win this series. But if not, 4 rings for LeBron. That's a good consolation prize as an NBA fan. And they would have definitely deserved it. The whole bubble championship, I don't want to hear that there's any asterisks around it or anything like that, because every team had to go through the same shit. It's not like it was unfair for a specific team. And there's no home court. This is strictly who's a better basketball player than your opponent every single game for these whole series. And I just think it's the most pure basketball we've seen in a long time, and I think that's why so many people are so impressed with the play, and everybody's like, oh, the level of the play and the bubble has just been great. I think there's some truth to that.